Welcome to Education Today, and thank you for continuing to tune into our show. Today, we're going to dig deep into Instructional Practice 3, Gradual Release. While Gradual Release is not new work for our district, it is one of the most difficult to master. As a district, we first introduced Gradual Release with our comprehensive literacy plan several years ago. Many of you became very familiar with the phrases of the Gradual Release. The most important thing to remember is Gradual Release is our way of ensuring students that they've been taught in a way that allows them to master content. Simply stated, Gradual Release is a systemic approach for shifting the cognitive load from teacher to learner. And I also have Assistant Superintendent Rodney Rowan here to discuss Gradual Release and what it looks like in all of our classrooms across the district.
Thank you, Dr. Whitelaw. So when we think about the gradual release process, we think about how do we engage students in learning and how do we know that they've mastered the content. So your typical gradual release is a I do, a we do, and a you do, which also aligns with the TIM rubric that we use to evaluate our teachers.
We'll take a few minutes and we'll have Dr. Dickey to review the steps of Gradual Release. Again, I want to thank Rodney for being here with us because he is an awesome assistant superintendent, an awesome teacher, an awesome leader.
Hello, Shelby County Schools. Thank you for the invitation to talk to you just a bit about the gradual release of responsibility. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and jump right in. So we've been talking for about 6 or 7 months now about the integrated approach to student achievement, which is a proven model for mitigating both the opportunity and the achievement gap. And a part of that discussion, we've talked about instructional practice number 1 being transforming state standards into performance-based objectives. Instructional practice number 2, ensuring that students are developing conceptual understanding of academic language, using the objective as a springboard for access to conceptual understanding of that language. And so today brings us to the gradual release of responsibility, which of course is a model for planning and delivering instruction characterized by the gradual release of responsibility, which is moving students away from dependence upon us as teachers to independence. And the gradual release of responsibility is really a model that is effective for planning and delivering ELA instruction, social studies instruction, mathematics, and electives or technical subjects instruction. I really don't believe that it is an effective model for science. We think that science should be an inquiry base, which really requires us to give kids an opportunity to be engaged in some type of conversation or respond to some type of question to engage them in the process of learning about the scientific concept or concepts that are under study, followed by an opportunity for them to explore that scientific concept without any tutelage from us, followed by an opportunity to either participate in a reading activity connected to that scientific concept that's under study, a lecture or a multimedia opportunity, followed by an opportunity for them to participate in an elaboration or an extension activity connected to that scientific concept, followed by an opportunity for them to be evaluated. And that evaluation could look however it needs to look to give kids access to a variety of ways to assess their understanding or their acquisition of new content and new skill. So gradual release of responsibility is really a model for everyone except for science. So let's dig a little bit deeper here. So solid instruction really always begins with a learning target or, and in this case, a performance-based objective. So for ELA, if we want children to cite strong and thorough textual evidence in order to support an analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text, we really have to make certain that children understand that cite means location, the location of the textual evidence in the text. They understand strong textual evidence is powerful, thorough textual evidence is complete, that textual evidence itself is information taken directly from the text, so forth and so on. So solid instruction always begins with students' understanding of the academic language that to which they will be exposed during the gradual release process. And if that's true for ELA, it's also true for mathematics. So if children are going to be learning how to examine information about a sample of a population in order to make valid generalizations about the population that's under analysis, gradual release can only begin after children after they possess conceptual understanding of the academic language that will be a part of the instructional conversation and the assessment opportunities. If it's true for those two content areas, it's also true for social studies. If children are going to be identifying the achievements of key historical figures in order to analyze the impact of their life on the United States, then children have to understand when you identify something, you're recognizing it and naming it. And achievements are things done successfully. Key historical figures are important folks from the past. And if they're going to be analyzing, they have to know that we really want them to be able to pull apart the effect of the key historical figure's life on the United States. And of course, the United States makes up to 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the 5 territories. So when we do surgery on the academic language, then we set kids up for the gradual release process to be active participants in the gradual release process. So let's talk about the 4 phases of gradual release of responsibility. In the past, we've thought of only 3 phases of gradual release, but there are actually 4. Are you familiar with the I do, the we do, you do in pairs, and you do without assistance? And my recommendation to you, Shelby County Public Schools, is to make sure that children know which phase they're in so they can govern themselves accordingly, and then allow you to govern yourself consistent with the true expectations of each one of those phases, which is why I think it's important to talk about teacher behaviors during each one of the 4 phases and student behaviors during each of the 4 phases. So in the I do, my responsibility as teacher is to model for students. Model what for students? The exact expectation of the performance-based objective. So they need to see me identify key details in the text in order to in order to determine the central idea of the text. Or they need to watch me identify key details in the text in order to determine the main topic of the text if they're kinder through 2nd grade. If they're 3rd through 5th grade, they want to see me model the process of identifying the key details in order to determine the main idea of the text. And if they're in grade 6 through 12, forgot to say that initially, they want to watch me model the process for identifying the key details in order to determine the central idea of the text. And while I'm modeling for them, it's really their responsibility to observe my thinking, to carefully observe my speaking or listening very carefully to my speaking, including mistakes that I might make in the process of correcting myself. They need to see us have conversations with ourselves about the work because we're modeling, critical thinking for them. It's not just modeling the content related to the objective. We're also modeling, correcting oneself and making, final decisions about relative to the content. They also need to see us model writing as well. So they're either going to be observing our thinking, listening very carefully to our speaking, and or observing our writing. Now, as it comes to the 2nd phase of gradual release of responsibility, which is the we do, it's really important here to make sure that we calibrate on the expectation of the we do. So then what is a we do? The we do is really an opportunity for us to become facilitators. Now, what does it mean to become a facilitator? The modeling actually, ceases at this point, and we go from, modeling for kids to having them model for us. So facilitate really means having students model for us. So, and it's not enough to have one student model for us. It's really important to have all students model for us so that we can require them to do the thinking, require them to do the speaking, require them to do the writing. Now, how does this look? I have the privilege of being able to go, around the country to observe instruction. I will tell you, I put this in red because this is one of the areas that I want to talk to the country about, and I'm happy to have an opportunity to talk to you about it. When we send one student up to the board to model for everyone, that's really still a model. It's really not a facilitation opportunity as much as we want it to be for kids. So then how should the we do look? The we do is really an opportunity for every student to do the work associated with the objective. And what does that mean? It means that if I've already modeled for kids how to identify the key details in order to determine the main idea of the text, now it's an opportunity for every student to pick up their pencil or their pen and think through either or speak through or write through and sort of like a formative assessment opportunity. So we want every kid to pick up their pencil and identify a key detail connected to the main idea of the text. And then my responsibility as their teacher is to look over their shoulder and give everyone feedback. Yep, you got it. Yep, you got it. Yep, you got it. Yep, you got it. Well, that's not what I want. I'm going to come back to you. Yep, you got it. I'm coming back to you. Yep, now you got it. So the we do is an opportunity for everyone to do the do. And if only a handful of students do the do, then we don't know if they're ready to go to the next phase of gradual release of responsibility, which is the working in pairs. We wouldn't even know how to pair kids if we don't know what they're able to do themselves. And so after students are successful with the we do, then we have an opportunity to have them work in pairs. And when they're working in pairs, to do the same thing that's outlined in the objective, the same thing that I modeled, the same thing that I facilitated for them, they have a third opportunity to engage in formative assessment or practice. And while kids are working, it's my responsibility to get around the room to do a quick assessment of who's experiencing difficulty and who's not. And where kids are experiencing difficulty, I might assist them in their group, or I might pull a small group while the other students continue to do the work. So we want to give them another opportunity to think and speak and write, but in pairs. And we don't want to do, more than two in a grouping, because then the work won't be shared evenly. And we also want to make sure that we don't always pair a high performing student with a striving student, because a high performing student sometimes will do the work of the striving student. It doesn't mean we never pair a high performer with a striver, but I think we have to be careful to make sure that those groups are flexible. Okay. And then finally here, once students have been successful in the I do, the we do, and the you do, then they have another opportunity to demonstrate knowledge and ability. But then as the teacher, I become the observer. And I can't help them at all unless their IEP says that, they have an accommodation or some type of modification to the work. And so what if students don't get through the I do, we do, you do in pairs, you do without assistance in one class period? That's fine. We don't want to rush them to a speed light. We don't want to, rush them without giving them the opportunity to develop, to get to mastery, so that eventually they can get to transfer. And so don't think of I do as Monday and we do as Tuesday and you do in pairs Wednesday and you do without assistance Thursday either. Let it be as organic as possible. And you will see that students will benefit from instruction characterized by the gradual release of responsibility. And now finally, I'm going to put 8 numbers on the screen. And what do these 8 numbers mean? Look down the teacher column. They basically mean that as that lesson progresses, we do less and less and less thinking and speaking for students and writing for students. And look down the student column. It means that as that lesson progresses, whether it be within one class period or over the course of a few days, students take on more and more and more of the responsibility, as they should. Okay, so with this said, if you have any questions about the gradual release of responsibility, I'm more than happy to respond to any questions that you might have. You guys can email me at educationalepiphany@gmail.com. All right, you've been a wonderful audience as usual. See you soon.
And now we will look at a video from Zone 7 under the leadership of IOD Fox. The teacher is Melissa Moore, and we will observe the I do portion of the lesson. This is a 3rd grade math lesson.
So it says, Thad sees 7 beetles when he weeds his garden. Each beetle has 6 legs. How many legs are there on all 7 beetles? Okay, so I know I'm going to work on my RDW while I work my word problem. So I've read it, but I know I haven't done anything with what I read, so I'm going to have to read it again and really look at what it's telling me. Thad sees 7 beetles when he weeds his garden. Each beetle has 6 legs. How many legs are there on all 7 beetles? So to help me make sure I know what I'm doing, I'm going to underline my question. And I'm going to make sure I know what it's telling me. How many legs are there on all 7 beetles? On all sounds a lot like... Oh, hold on. Sounds a lot like I'm going to solve for a total. And I know that since this is my question, that's going to be my unknown. So I'm going to go back in and make sure that that is correct in what I know with what information it gives me. So Thad sees 7 beetles when he weeds his garden. Each beetle has 6 legs. I know that word each is going to be important. 6 legs. So each beetle, and I know that each is a clue for the size of my groups. We've done so many multiplication and division questions. Each is it sticks in there. It's stuck in my brain as size of my groups, or how many are in the groups. So the size of my group is 6 legs. So that means 7 beetles has to be my number of groups. So now I've got my information. I'm going to write it out so I can really see it. I have 7 beetles, 6 legs on each. I don't know the total legs. So if I'm looking for my total is unknown, I am going to be doing multiplication. When I'm solving for the total and I got groups, means I'm using multiplication. I'm going to make sure I remember that. So how do you think about, I've got my drawing. I know, let me see, make sure I can see my whole paper. Here's my notes I made. I know I could draw beetles and their legs, but then that might be a little confusing. I'm going to stick with one diagram. I'm going to use a tape diagram. So I have my tape diagram. I have 7 beetles. That was my groups. So that's how many units I need. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Got 7 beetles. It also told me there were 6 legs on each. I could also draw those legs so I can see them, because I like to visualize. I'm going to use the letter B to help me instead of using a question mark. I know that will help me keep up with what I'm looking for. I don't know the total number of legs. So now I've got my drawing. All I have left is to write. But remember, I've got to write a number sentence and a word sentence. So before I solve, I'm going to go back to my question. How many legs are there on all 7 beetles? I'm looking for the total. I'm going to rewrite that as my answer so I can have my word sentence ready for me. How many legs are there on all 7 beetles? There are blank legs on all 7 beetles. So it sounds very similar to my question, so I'll know that I have the right answer if it fits in that sentence. So now I'm going to find my number sentence. I have 7 beetles. Multiplication times 6 legs on each gives me B, my total, because I'm using a number instead of a blank or a question mark. But now I've got to figure out how can I solve. I don't know 7 times 6. Oh, I can do one. I can skip count. I can say 6. So I know how to count by 6s. 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 42. So B equals 42. So there are 42 legs on all 7 beetles. But just to be sure, I'm also going to use another strategy to check and make sure it actually is 42. So we've been talking about the distributive property, because I know if I don't know 7 times 6, I can break this up. I can say 5 times 6 plus 2 times 6. So I can know, well, 5 times 6, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, plus 2 times 6, it's just 12, equals 42. So I've checked it twice and I got the same answer, so I think I can be safe with saying that there are 42 legs on all 7 beetles.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Excellent job setting the expectations prior to the I do. We also saw her model a think aloud, where she modeled the thinking process through language, like numbers of groups, sizes of groups, and an unknown total. Additionally, we saw Ms. Moore using a great Eureka Math tool, the tape diagram. She used this tool to show a visual representation of how to solve the problem. Our next exemplar is an ELA lesson from Zone 11 under the leadership of ILD Corey Williams. The teacher is Brian Walker, and Brian Walker is a teacher at White Station Middle School.
So let's think about this. So we're going to start with, I'm going to show you how to write a counterclaim paragraph. I'm going to show you how I do it. So what I want y'all to do is just to listen and think about the steps that I go through when I write one. And take notes. Make sure you're writing down how I write one, because in a few minutes, as a class, we're going to write one together, and then you'll write a counterclaim paragraph on your own that you can use in the essay that we're going to write. But for right now, I just want you to listen, and your part of this is just to take notes on what we're talking about. All right, so in counterclaims, typically you deal with counterclaims by, number 1, stating what the counterclaim is, number 2, state why the counterclaim is wrong, and then 3, give evidence from the text, from a source, on why the counterclaim is wrong. So you'll state the counterclaim, that is, what do your opponents say, then you'll state why the counterclaim is wrong, why are your opponents wrong, and then third, you will give evidence from the text on why you're right and they're wrong. Make sense? So let's think about this. As we deal with the text that we read about banning large sodas in New York City. So my claim for my essay is going to be that the law banning large sodas in New York is a good law that helps people be healthier, and the government has a duty to protect its citizens. So that's my thesis statement. So you can see my claim, my prompt, and 2 reasons. Is everybody with me? Give me applause if you're with me. Very good. All right, so I'm going to state the counterclaim. This is what my opponents would say, because I'm for the law, someone who's against the law. Some people say that if you educate people on the dangers of too much soda, then they will make better choices and you won't need a law. So you remember that's the argument that came from the 2 articles that we read that were against the law. So I'm just taking that from the text. So now I'm going to argue against it. I'm going to state why the counterclaim is wrong. So I would say that, however, while education is always a good idea, and notice I started with however, I transitioned from what they said, and I gave a transition word there so the reader knows I'm going from what my opponents say to the opposite, what I say. However, while education is always a good idea, some people know what they should do but still make bad choices. This law would help them make good choices. So I'm going to give evidence for that. I'm arguing that education's fine, but people don't always do what they know they should. So giving them the knowledge isn't enough. And why? I'm taking my argument from Conley's article about the nanny state. Conley explains that we often have cognitive bias, and there are many of them, a lot of ways in which our own minds trip us up. Y'all remember her talking about the different types of cognitive bias. So those are the 3 steps in the counterclaim. You state the counterclaim, then I state why the counterclaim is wrong, and then I give evidence from the text. So I'm proving, my evidence proves that educating people is not enough, because cognitive bias keeps us from doing the things that we intellectually know but still don't do. So you put it all together in one paragraph. And you also know I started with, some people say that that's a good way to start a counterclaim paragraph. Some people say, some people argue, others may argue. And if you notice in the text we read, that is how those authors started their counterclaims. That's good language to use to start one. Some people say that if you educate people on the dangers of too much soda, then they will make better choices and a law won't be necessary. However, while education is always a good idea, often people know what they should do but still make bad choices. This law would help people make good choices. Kindly explains that the reason people often make bad choices is that we have cognitive bias, and there are many of them, a lot of ways in which our own minds trip us up. All right, raise your hand if you follow and understand writing a counterclaim paragraph. Good. Great job, Ethan, with the physical hand going up. All right, good. Hands down. Good. All right, now raise your hand if you have a question about writing a counterclaim paragraph. Sholin, Michael? Who has a question? All right, good. If no one has a question, we're going to move into writing one as a class. So we will write one together. So y'all will speak up and give ideas for writing a counterclaim paragraph. And then your assignment will be to write one on your own, each person individually. So let's start with this. Write the first sentence of a counterclaim paragraph if your claim is that the soda ban is a bad law. So we're going to take the opposite stance of what I did in mine. And as a class, we're going to come up with counterclaims for the soda ban is a bad law. So if you think soda ban is a bad law, what is something your opponents would say? Go ahead and post that. You can think back to the text. If you need to remember, the texts are back around page 277 in the book. So some people say that the soda ban gives people education on what they should do and help them make good choices. Some people say the soda ban is the start of government domination. Good. Some people argue that the soda law helps people by eliminating their source of trouble.
In this video, we noticed that the teacher performed a think aloud. The teacher modeled his thought process and what was expected of students when writing a counterclaim. The teacher also gave specific steps for students to use in latter phases of the gradual release. He made students aware of their responsibility during the model and released the majority of the cognitive lift to the students in the we do portion of the lesson. Every student's progress was able to be assessed using Nearpod. Let's take a moment to look at one of our spotlight videos featuring Principal Michael Dempster from the Maxine Smith Academy. He's recognized as a veteran principal who beat the odds by increasing and maintaining high levels of teacher agreement on the Instructional Culture Insight Survey. His staff rated his leadership style as one of being consistent, equitable, enjoyable, making Maxine Smith Academy a great place to work and learn.
Adjustments that we've made over to make sure that our culture survives this virtual environment is a tough one, because there's no answer, there's no book. From the beginning of the year, our motto was go slow so we can go fast. And we've kept true to that, because there's the idea is you can only do one thing at a time anyways. So let's work on one thing at a time. Let's fail at it. Let's mess it up. Let's then get it right. Collaboration, attitude, responsibility, and effort. I say it a dozen times. And teachers, we talk about those core values, and we set that tone that we're going to collaborate with a positive attitude, and we're going to be responsible, and we're going to put in the effort it takes to get the results that our students deserve. So we are constantly using our see it, name it, do it protocols. Even in our planning stages, we anticipate what we're going to, as an ILT, we anticipate what we're going to do in PLCs. And we use that lens of naming possible misconceptions, naming possible gaps in understanding, so we can then plan for a successful outcome. It's trust. Trust, trust, trust. The biggest thing that I've learned about myself this year is that I have to empower, to trust the capacity of my team, to celebrate when they fail, and to trust that they're living the vision that we've set together. When our kids come to us, they really embody our culture. They want to share ideas. They are happy to be here and excited to be at school. Even in our virtual space, I've been impressed with the energy and enthusiasm that our kids are bringing to learning, even in these difficult times.
Awesome teachers, we want to thank you for your continued work in serving Shelby County Schools' amazing students. We know that this has been an unprecedented time, and yet you all continue to rise to the occasion in service to students. Your commitment and dedication to Shelby County Schools does not go unnoticed. In the face of the pandemic, you led through the moment during this bleak time. As we continue through the days ahead, let's continue to show each other patience and grace as we navigate these uncharted waters. Your service to students and families has been exemplary. Thank you for tuning in to Education Today. We hope to see you the next time.
Thank you, Rodney. And thank you for tuning in to the Education Today show.